Welcome everyone, this is the Tekken 8 Zafina Basics Guide. Zafina is a shifty stance-based character that relies heavily on strong neutral tools to help facilitate transitions to those stances. So if you like playing lots of neutral with bursts of stance play, Zaf is your gal. This guide is meant for beginners or intermediate players looking to quickly pick up a new character, so expect a brief rundown to jumpstart your learning and get you playing some matches. We will keep technical lingo, especially frames, to a minimum, but you should still have some knowledge on basic standardized Tekken terms, especially notations and terms for various game mechanics. In other words, although this guide is meant for beginners, you should already know a little bit about the game, just not necessarily the character. There are some links in the video description below to help you out. Similarly, make note that we are on version 3.01 as of this recording. Update videos will be made when newer videos with balance changes come out, so be on the lookout for those as this video ages. But enough of all that, let us begin. So for the most part, you're going to lean heavily on Zafina's jabs and down forward 1. Her jabs, both her 1 and 2 jab, have a bunch of extensions, so in addition to the simple single jab harass that every character plays, your jab strings will allow you both to freeze your opponents as well as give you entry into all 3 of your stances. If you're just looking for some pokes, 2-1 and 2-2 are very strong as safe high-mid strings, but again, all of these extensions have value depending on which stance you're aiming for. Down forward 1 is a lot simpler in that it's a quick, safe mid poke. You have a mid extension that hurts a lot if they're swinging into it, or you have a safe high extension that does a solid amount of damage. Just be aware of the duck risk. Otherwise, just poke with it, backdash if it gets blocked, and wait for a punish opportunity. Now beyond that, there are 2 ways to go about your offense. One common approach is to play a neutral game and get your strings going to try to catch some big hits. 1+2 is one example that you'll see spammed a lot because it has 3 potential hits, all of which are only a little punishable but can also give you a juggle if any of them hit counter hits, so it really puts pressure on the opponent to guess where you're going to stop. Otherwise, just go through and find strings that you like. Forward 2-3 has duck risk, but it is safe on block and has stance play or third hit for more cover. You can also pretty easily confirm the second hit rather than hard committing to it. Down forward 3 is similar. Again, there's duck risk, but again, there are extensions or a stance option. Down forward 4 only has unsafe mid options, but there's a cancel in there you can play timing games with, and you have an engager option too. Down 2 has a lot of block risk, but multiple stance options and a third hit to cover those. So again, just find the ones you like, and if you're going to play a string heavy style, make sure to sprinkle them all in a little bit to keep your opponent on their toes. Just understand the risks inherent to each one. The other option is to stick to a single hit style and use those stronger single hit moves to get into stances or just put on some general pressure. We'll talk stance specifics in a moment, but forward 3 is a common tool that gives you an approach option with advantage on block. That also has the option to go to SCR. Down back 3 is a poke that accomplishes that same transition just from a low. Down 3 is extremely common since it goes under highs and can yield a launch on counter hit, but it's another that can go to stance with advantage on hit. Down back 4 is another low poke that can go to stance. It doesn't give advantage on normal hit, but it has a second hit that launches, so you can use that to freeze your opponent and take back initiative. Running 3 and running 1+2 are more pressure tools. The former can go to SCR and the latter goes to TRT. Forward 1+2 is a great safe heavy hitting mid as well. It really just boils down to which stance you're trying to get to or whether you just want to stay standing. So with that, let's talk stances. She has 3, which of course we already kind of mentioned: Scarecrow or SCR, Tarantula or TRT, and Mantis or MNT. Combined, you have a lot of options in stance, so we're going to break it down like this. First, TRT is the least utilized of the 3 because it actually doesn't have a ton of options. You only have 1 low, which is just a poke, and although the mids are strong, there just really isn't a huge incentive for your opponent to duck against it. You're largely relying on the low profile of the stance to go under stuff, or you're hoping they mindlessly swing into something. On the flip side, MNT is probably the strongest because you actually can run a bit of a mix-up game here. Down 4 is your raw damage option, but you have MNT 3, 4, and down 1 that all start with low pokes but have powerful mid enders to scare opponents. MNT 1 is similar but a mid starter. Down forward 1 and down forward 2 are safe and powerful mid options. Down forward 4 is not bad either, paired with MNT 4, since both can lead to TRT if you are preferential to that stance. Or you can play a riskier string game with MNT 2, but the mids have a significant power spike when you hit counter hits, so although the normal mix-up potential is there, it's a strong strategy to harass with the lows to bait out a response. Or even just use something like your down 3 transition, which remember gives advantage on hit. MNT also has a fairly low profile and you're not without an armor move, so the setup potential is strong. Oh, and it's the only one of the 3 that you can block from. And then lastly, with SCR, you're mostly trying to maneuver to something else. Your 2 big damage lows are both a lot slower than anything else in SCR and very, very risky. Not that they can't work, but you'll see far more often safer moves like SCR 1+2, which is a powerful mid that allows you to continue standing pressure. Or either of the SCR2 extensions, since they are fairly low risk mid strings. SCR 1-4 is another lower risk interrupt option that will go to TRT. Even if they punish it, it's unlikely to be a big punish. Or if you need to use a low, down forward 4 is a nice poke that'll take you to MNT with advantage, and back 1+2 is a quick low poke that will take you back to neutral, again with advantage. And both will go under highs, but SCR is largely about how risky you want to get. SCR 4, for example, can be scary since it's an armored mid launcher, but it's also terrible on block, so you have to reserve it for times that you truly believe they're going to challenge the stance. And you can try those slower big damage lows, but they'll be hard to use against players with strong defensive timings. That's why you'll see a lot of the safer stuff, but the general tip is to play a lot of neutral and then either find an entry into MNT with something like down 3 or get into SCR with a follow-up of either down forward 4, again to get yourself to MNT, or 1+2 to reset yourself back to neutral. But if you're really stance crazed, don't feel bad digging deep into the move list to get those wonky transitions or even transition manually in neutral. Although we went over a lot in the offense section, in truth, Zafina is a defensive character at heart. Her punishing isn't exactly the best in the game, but her movement is still top notch, which means a very strong backdash and sidestep, so the opportunities for punishes should be higher than other characters. We'll start with jabs. Her best jab punishers are 1-3 and 1-4. Normally you want 1-3 because the SCR transition is preferred over the TRT transition, and you only lose a couple of points of damage. Down forward 1-4 is your next fastest option, and it is solid if it hits, especially at the wall. Just be mindful that you have considerable risk if your punish comes out late. You have a couple of situational options after that, namely down forward 4-1 and down forward 3-4, but then you can start launching with down forward 2. However, her down forward 2 is a little slower than typical, so that can impact your block punishing quite a bit. Crouch is a little better since while standing 3 is almost as fast as while standing 4. It does chunky damage and has the option for SCR. Then she can start launching at a typical speed with while standing 1-2. Now for evasion, you can actually use MNT and TRT here if you want, which gives you some fun stuff to play with. Otherwise, your jump options are basically just up forward 3 and up forward 4. Up forward 3 is your safer option, but slower and only gives a knockdown, whereas up forward 4 is riskier, but quicker and gives the launch in return. For high evasion, down 3 is the gold standard. It's going to be a primary poke anyway, but it also gives that juicy launch on counter hit. If you want to get even more reward, but with a little more risk, you can also use down back 4-2, which again gives you that big counter hit launch opportunity, but it does have to be counter hit for the string to combo. Although you can certainly use down back 4 by itself. Sometimes you'll also see down back 1+2 since it is a low launcher. Just keep in mind that it's slow and very, very risky on block. Beyond evasion, you do have some decent counter hit tools. 1+2 is the most common, which we already mentioned. It's quick, it's a mid, and has a lot of versatility because of the string extension. Similarly, if you're pressuring with forward 3 and happen to nab a counter hit, you'll get a nice little follow-up there. Or even a full juggle if your meter is going. Down back 2 is another common safe mid with counter hit potential and very quick to boot. Same speed as down forward 1, in fact. Speaking of, forward 4 is basically a stronger version of the second hit of your down forward 1-4 string. It doesn't get anything special on counter hit, it's just a fast, safe knockdown tool. But your strings have a lot of counter hit potential too. For example, down forward 1 can yield some nice damage if they swing into the extensions. Down 1-1 and down forward 3-4 will give a launch if the second hit lands counter hit, and down 1-1 can be delayed. Back 4-4 is another option, no juggle here, but you can safely poke with back 4 and confirm the second hit. And even something like forward 2 and forward 2-3 will give you a juggle on counter hit. So you have some nice options if you're dialed into your opponent's timing. It's a more active style of defense, but it's still a good way to play combined with a strong single hit style. Lastly, outside of your generic heat burst, you do have a couple of armor moves, which are back 3 and your reversal. They're not what I would call spammable, but sometimes you'll have to use them, so keep them in mind. First, shoutouts to some utility tools. Forward 4 is a great safe mid homing tool. It's very useful for controlling space in the mid range. Forward 2 is another strong homing tool, not quite as much range, and it's a high, but it also gives a little bit more advantage on block and hits really hard. Back 2 is another decent one, another high, but gives nice reward on hit. Even down forward 2+3 is a fun one to play with. It's very slow, but it's a safe mid launcher, so she has a pretty good kit of homing tools. Now for meter. First, you might have noticed how all of her stances have a down forward forward 1 that are similar strong mid attacks. With heat, these gain armor while also using some of your meter. The other thing that changes is that you might have noticed some moves, including some we've shown, including the aforementioned down forward 1s, deal self-chip damage. All of these moves no longer deal self-chip when the meter is going. Thanks to a recent patch, these moves don't deal insane self-chip to begin with, but once the meter is active, you can really get to spamming them. So her heat isn't oppressive, but it does allow you to use certain moves a bit more. As usual for these guides, we will skip juggle since there are so many combo videos out there you can watch, but I did throw a link in the video description below where you can find some samples. Finally, let's talk about chip, specifically chip Zafina does to the opponent, and the highlight here really are the Azazel moves. Forward 1+2 stands out among them because it's solid without heat, but with meter you can spam it really hard, and it's not a move that eats your meter. The stance down forward 1s work similarly, but your meter evaporates when you use those. Forward 1+2 doesn't worry about that. And the only other Azazel move that's like that is also safe is SCR-21, but that is stance locked, so you have to keep getting into stance to use it. Again, forward 1+2 doesn't have to worry about that, so she can actually pile up the chip damage pretty well with just that one move. Oh, and if you feel confident that it'll hit, you can heat dash for a full combo. This brings us to the end of our guide. I hope you found this succinct and helpful. Feedback is always welcome, so feel free to toss a comment down below, respectfully of course. Be mindful that in-depth guides that go over more specific details of move attributes and strategies will be saved for intermediate guides in the not so distant future. So be on the lookout for those. Lastly, big thanks to our patrons. You guys are the best and that support means more than you know. But to everyone, stay safe and we'll see you next time.